In a peaceful village called Nuku, where the rivers hummed softly and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers, a young girl named Zola lived with her father, her stepmother, Mama Queasy, and her stepsister, Emily. Zola's real mother, once the village healer, had passed away many seasons ago. Though she had left the world, her spirit lingered in Zola's gentle hands and kind heart. Can you imagine a place so serene yet hiding such a dark secret? Stay with us on Innocent Stories to uncover the shocking truth. Zola was different. While other girls played or braided each other's hair, Zola collected herbs, helped the elderly with chores, and listened more than she spoke. She was always the first to offer help, the last to demand anything. The villagers adored her. Like mother, like daughter, they often whispered with fondness. But inside the same compound lived Emily, beautiful in the way wildfires are beautiful, sharp, bright, and dangerous. Emily resented the way Zola attracted admiration without trying. She hated how people came to Zola for advice, even though Emily was older. Most of all, she hated the quiet light in Zola's eyes, a light that Mama Queasy never saw in her own daughter. Mama Queasy was a woman who measured love in comparisons. She never missed a chance to praise Emily, but her praise came loaded with poison. Emily's skin is like polished wood, Zola's always dusty from kneeling in soil. Emily laughs like a lady, Zola laughs like she's chasing chickens. And when no one was watching, she made Zola scrub the compound twice, eat last, and sleep on a mat by the door while Emily had a mattress stuffed with cotton. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the baobab trees, a town crier walked through the village, beating a drum and announcing a royal decree. The king's palace was opening its gates to train one village girl in the art of healing. The chosen girl would live with a royal herbalist and learn everything from treating fevers to reviving a dying man with roots and whispers. The opportunity would be given through a scholarship, only one spot. The village buzzed with excitement. Mothers bathed their daughters in scented oils. Fathers brought goats to the elders to win favor. But what happens when jealousy festers in the heart of one girl? Keep watching Innocent Stories to find out how this tale unfolds. Zola, however, said nothing. She continued her daily chores, but when no one was looking, she stitched her application together, gathering testimonies from villagers she had helped, drawing diagrams of leaves and their uses, and even adding a poem she wrote in honor of her late mother. Emily watched in silence. She was sure her beauty and Mama Queasy's influence would carry her through. One evening, while brushing Emily's hair, Mama Queasy whispered, "If Zola wins, your shame will be louder than a drumbeat. Do you want people to say the poor rat outpaced the leopard?" That night, something shifted in Emily's eyes. Jealousy, once a slow-burning ember, caught flame. And in the shadows of their shared home, a quiet war began, one that would not be fought with fists or words, but with something far more dangerous. Emily had always believed she was the one meant to shine. She had the looks, the charm, the backing of her mother, and that should have been enough. But in recent weeks, something unsettling began to happen. Every time she walked through the village, people whispered not about her braided hair or the anklets that jingled as she walked, but about Zola's kindness. Zola helped deliver a baby when the midwife was late. Zola tended to a farmer's dying wife. Zola knew the difference between healing and showing off. One afternoon, Emily lingered behind the council hut out of boredom more than curiosity when she overheard something that made her stomach twist. "The orphan girl," one elder said, "her application is impressive. Detailed notes, testimonies from half the village. A heart like her mother's." Another elder chuckled, "If healing were a matter of the soul, she's already won." Emily's mouth went dry. She waited until they left, then ran home, cheeks burning. That night, she slammed her bedroom door and wept bitterly into her pillow. Later, while combing Emily's hair by lantern light, Mama Queasy sensed something brewing and decided to fuel it. "Child, you look tired," she said softly. "Has Zola been casting spells in her prayers again? Pretending to be kind so everyone forgets who you are?" Emily gritted her teeth. "She's winning hearts on purpose." Mama Queasy whispered, as if sharing a forbidden truth, "She wants to erase you. She walks like your shadow, waiting to take what's yours." That night, Emily didn't sleep. Her eyes stared into the thatch roof, thoughts unraveling like thread. She thought of all the times Zola offered to share, to help, to forgive. What if it was all an act? What if her sweetness was a trap? What if Mama Queasy was right? The next evening, Zola walked quietly to her mother's grave behind the compound. She knelt there, whispering a prayer, her hands resting on the soil. Emily watched from a distance, eyes dark. "Dead women leave daughters who steal futures," she muttered. A storm rolled over her heart, something wicked and heavy. Later that night, when the village was asleep and the frogs croaked like old drums, Emily crept into the old storage shed near the banana trees, the one her mother used to keep weed killers and goat medicine. She opened jars and bottles one by one until she found a small, worn glass vial. No label, just a sharp, stinging smell that made her eyes water. Her mother once said it burned through thorns. Strong enough to kill weeds. Strong enough to kill something else. Emily didn't think of consequences. Her heart thudded like a war drum. She clutched the bottle tightly and tucked it under her wrapper. "If she drinks this," Emily whispered, "she won't make it to the test." And in that moment, jealousy, once a whisper, became a scream that echoed inside her. The night before the scholarship exam, the compound carried an unusual tension. The moon hung low and orange, casting strange shadows over the hut walls. Zola hummed softly as she packed her satchel with herbs and a sharpened reed pen. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but hope. This was her chance to become more than just the orphan girl. Mama Queasy, ever watchful, approached with unusual warmth. "Zola," she called sweetly, "come help me pick sweetleaf in the backyard. I want to prepare tea for the morning, something to calm your nerves." Zola, though surprised by her kindness, nodded and followed her. In truth, she was glad for any sign of peace. As Zola tended to the herbs, Emily moved quickly inside. She pulled the small bottle from beneath her wrapper. The glass was cool and smooth, but she knew what it held could scorch through skin and soul. Her hands shook as she uncorked it. The porridge pot steamed gently in the center of the hut. 3 bowls sat ready, one for her, one for Zola, one for Mama Queasy. Emily hesitated. She didn't want to risk her mother's bowl. She chose the one closest to the right-hand mat, Zola's usual seat. Carefully, she poured the acidic liquid into the bowl, watching it blend unnoticed into the pale porridge. To mark it, she scratched the outside of the clay bowl with her fingernail, just a tiny nick, barely visible. Then she placed it back exactly where it was. A sudden sound outside startled her. She dropped the bottle but caught it before it shattered. Her heart pounded. In her rush, she nudged the bowls slightly, shifting their positions just an inch or two. Emily froze. Which one had the scratch? Which bowl was hers? Panic bloomed in her chest. She squinted in the dim light, then made her best guess and sat down. Zola returned moments later, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "The mint leaves have flowered," she smiled, setting down a cup of boiled water for the tea. The 3 of them sat down for breakfast, the porridge bowls steaming in front of them. Emily stared at her bowl, her spoon trembling. She glanced at the mark, but it seemed fainter now. Was it the same bowl, or had it shifted during her panic? Mama Queasy sipped her tea without a word. Zola offered a soft smile, unaware of the storm coiled around her. As the steam curled upward and the spoons clinked gently, fate stood silently at the table. No one knew that death had been stirred into one of the bowls. And no one, not even Emily, knew whose spoon would meet it first. The sun rose with a golden glow, painting the red earth in soft light. Birds chirped on the thatched rooftops, and the village hummed gently awake. It was the day of the scholarship test, the day Zola had been dreaming of for months. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied her wrapper, but her eyes glowed with quiet hope. She had spent years watching the royal herbalist from afar, memorizing every plant name and salve recipe. Today, she might finally step onto the path her mother once walked. Emily sat across from her at the low table, her face calm, but her lips curled into a faint smirk. Her stomach churned, but she told herself it was just nerves. The bowls of porridge steamed before them, simple and warm. Mama Queasy sipped her tea with an unreadable expression. Zola clasped her hands for a brief prayer, whispering thanks to her mother's spirit, then lifted her spoon. But before it could reach her mouth, a loud bark split the air. Shaka! Zola turned to see the family dog barking furiously, tugging at her wrapper with his teeth. His tail was stiff, his eyes wide. "What is it, boy?" she asked, confused. The dog darted toward the door and barked again, almost as if he wanted her to follow. Setting down her spoon, Zola stood and stepped outside, calling, maybe he saw a snake. In her sudden exit, the mat shifted. Her bowl nudged slightly. The bowls, all nearly identical, shuffled without notice. Inside, Emily sat frozen. Her eyes darted toward the remaining bowls. The scratch! Where was the scratch? She spotted a faint mark on the bowl closest to her. She exhaled, convinced this was the safe one. She dipped her spoon and took a large bite, swallowing quickly. Within seconds, her mouth tingled, then burned. The sensation spread like fire down her throat. Her eyes bulged. Her spoon clattered to the floor. "Ma," she choked out, her voice gurgling. Her hands clawed at her throat as her lips blistered, and her tongue felt as though it were being scalded by the sun. Zola rushed back in. "What's happening, Emily?" Emily collapsed, writhing on the floor, gasping for air. Mama Queasy screamed, dropping her cup. She knelt beside her daughter, eyes wide in terror. "Emily, Emily, speak to me." The scent of acid rose faintly from the fallen bowl. Zola looked from the spilled porridge to Emily's contorted face, confusion and fear clouding her mind. "What was in the food?" she whispered. Emily couldn't answer. Her lips were already blistering. The hut erupted in chaos. Zola tried to lift Emily's head, tears filling her eyes. Mama Queasy pushed her aside, sobbing. Outside, Shaka barked again. Inside, Karma had arrived silently, swiftly, and far too soon. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time the sun reached the tops of the tallest trees, a crowd had gathered outside Zola's home. Inside, Emily lay on a straw mat, her face swollen, her lips cracked in weeping fluid. Her breaths came in short, painful gasps. The village healer, a sharp-eyed old woman named Colathandi, arrived with a satchel full of roots and salts. She examined Emily carefully, sniffing the remnants of the porridge, then dipping a wooden stick into the vomit Emily had produced. Her face hardened. "This is no stomach sickness," she announced grimly. "This is not food poisoning from bad yam or sour milk." She turned to the elders. "This is sabotage, a type of acid meant to burn from the inside." Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd like a sudden gust of wind. Zola, kneeling beside Emily, clutched a damp cloth to her stepsister's forehead. Her hands trembled, her eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered, "just tell us what you ate. Maybe we can treat it." Emily's eyes fluttered open, bloodshot and panicked. She tried to speak. Mama Queasy crouched behind her, leaned in close, and hissed, "Be quiet. Rest, my child." But Emily pushed her hand away. Her voice, though broken, cracked through the silence like thunder. It was meant for her," she choked. "It was for Zola." The compound fell utterly still. Zola froze, her mouth hanging open. "What?" she whispered. Emily wept, her face contorted with pain and shame. I put it in. I didn't know the bowls moved. I thought it was yours." "No!" Mama Queasy barked, trying to cover her daughter's mouth. "She's confused. The pain is making her say nonsense." But an elder stood tall. "Let the girl speak." Emily moaned and turned her head away, tears trailing into her hair. She was going to win. Everyone loved her. I wanted her to miss the test. Not this. Zola fell back on her heels, breath stolen from her lungs. "Why would you try to kill me?" Her voice cracked like dry wood. No one spoke. A messenger was sent immediately to summon the village chief. The scholarship elders, having already begun assembling for the examination, were told of the incident. Word reached them before Zola could even change her clothes. The chief arrived in silence, flanked by 2 guards. He looked over the scene, his eyes dark as the storm clouds above the mountains. "The test will be postponed," he said firmly. "Until we know the full truth, no one will be allowed to compete." Zola pressed her palms to her face and sobbed. Emily lay on the mat, broken by her pain, by her failure, and most of all, by her own hand. And the village watched as the mask of jealousy fell, revealing the terrible cost of envy left to fester. Under the broad shade of the ancient baobab tree, where births were blessed and disputes were settled, the entire village gathered. The branches swayed in the breeze like wise old arms cradling the air. Elders sat in a half-circle on carved wooden stools, their faces solemn, eyes fixed on the ground. Children sat cross-legged, wide-eyed. The whispers of the morning had turned into a roar of concern and judgment. Emily sat on a woven mat, her face covered in a light cloth. Her lips were scabbed and swollen, her tongue too damaged to form full words. She winced with every breath, a living reminder of what hatred could do when it turned inward. Mama Queasy stood a few paces behind her, arms folded tightly, feigning confusion. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "She's only a child." She didn't understand. She thought it was a harmless mixture. It was all a mistake. But her performance failed to win sympathy. The villagers weren't blind. One woman whispered to another, "This isn't the first time that family has brewed trouble." Another murmured, "Queasy taught that girl to despise kindness. You can see it in her eyes." The eldest of the council, Baba Mantu, stood with the help of his staff and addressed the crowd. "This is the second time acid has spilled in our village," he said slowly. "Do you remember Linda? Burned by her sister out of spite. She never saw the sunrise again after that day. Are we to make the same mistakes twice?" A hush fell over the gathering. The chief looked to Zola, standing quietly beside the healer. Her face was tired, but there was no anger in her eyes. Just sorrow. "Zola," the chief said gently, "do you accuse them?" Zola lowered her gaze. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her. After a long pause, she replied, "They are still my family. I won't be the one to shame them." Gasps moved through the crowd. A few elders shook their heads in disbelief. "They tried to kill you," one voice called out from the back, but Zola's voice didn't tremble. "What they gave me was bitterness. I won't feed it back." The chief nodded solemnly. "Your heart is noble, but justice must not sleep under the pillow of forgiveness. If we let this go, another girl may not be as lucky as you." He turned to the council. "The girl must face consequences. The mother too. This was not a child's mistake alone. It was a homegrown poison." Mama Queasy's shoulders stiffened. The chief raised his hand. "We will rule by midday tomorrow. Let all hearts prepare." As the villagers dispersed, whispers followed Mama Queasy like smoke from a dying fire. Some pitied her. Most did not. And in the quiet that followed, the baobab tree stood firm, bearing witness once again to the village's oldest truth: jealousy planted in silence grows thorns sharp enough to bleed everyone. The following day, the village returned to the baobab tree, the air thick with anticipation. The chief stood flanked by the council elders, his voice clear and firm as he delivered the judgment. "Emily will receive full treatment under Kolithandi," he began. "She will be cared for, not as a reward, but as a reminder that even those who stray deserve the dignity of healing." A few villagers nodded solemnly. "However," the chief continued, "she forfeits her right to the royal scholarship. One who poisons a sister for a title has not yet earned the path of healing others." Emily bowed her head, unable to lift her eyes. Her burns had begun to scab over, but her silence spoke of deeper wounds. Then the chief turned to Mama Queasy. "As for you, you who claim to know herbs, yet fed your daughter bitterness and bred jealousy in your home, you are hereby stripped of your herbal license. From this day, you will no longer sell, prepare, or distribute remedies in our village." Mama Queasy gasped, clutching her chest. "But I was only—" "You are the voice behind the act," the chief said. "And silence, when poison is being planned, is equal to pouring it." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some even clapped softly. The chief's voice softened as he looked at Zola. And to you, Zola, the girl who was nearly destroyed by envy. You are being offered a second chance. The test will be held in 1 week. You may compete alone. Zola looked around, uncertain. Her eyes fell on Emily, then on the elders, then on her trembling hands. I don't know if I have the strength, she said quietly. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, placing a firm hand on Zola's shoulder. You forgave your attacker. You held her head while she burned. A girl who forgives venom with medicine deserves to heal more than bones. She should heal hearts. Another woman echoed, You are your mother's daughter. Don't let this pain be the end of your story. Zola closed her eyes. In the stillness, her mother's voice echoed in memory, Healing is not just in the hands, my child. It begins in the heart. She nodded slowly. I'll do it, she whispered. The village, for the first time in days, smiled. 1 week later, Zola stood at the edge of the testing grove, her satchel slung over her shoulder, the morning sun glinting off dew-drenched leaves. She breathed in the scent of earth and herbs and steadied her heart. The judges sat under a canopy of palm fronds, scrolls and writing boards in their laps. Beside them stood the royal herbalist himself, a tall man with silver beads woven into his beard. The test began with a walk through the forest. Zola was given a basket and asked to gather 10 useful healing plants. She moved with quiet confidence, identifying bark, roots, and leaves not just by sight, but by scent and feel. The judges followed her with curious glances. She didn't rush, but she didn't hesitate either. Next, she was led to a pen where a small goat lay trembling. Its belly was bloated, and it struggled to breathe. Zola knelt without a word, checked the animal's gums, massaged its sides, and gently lifted its head. With a blend of clay, salt water, and a crushed fern root, she made a paste and fed it to the goat slowly. The animal let out a weak bleat and, within minutes, began to settle. The final task was the most difficult. She was handed a scroll with one question: You discover someone has swallowed acid. What do you do? Zola stared at the parchment. Her fingers trembled, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she had lived it. She looked up and, with a quiet voice, said to the judges, You do not give them water. You do not make them vomit. You soothe the pain with milk or egg white. You cool the burns with thyme. But most of all, she paused, her eyes glistening, you do not respond with fire. Sometimes the cure is not just in the roots, but in restraint. Silence followed. Then one judge leaned back and whispered, She's not just a healer. She's a lesson. By the time the sun reached its peak, the results were announced. Zola was named the top candidate, the one who would train under the royal herbalist in the palace. The village erupted in cheers. But Zola did not dance or boast. Instead, she walked home, washed her hands, and carried a small jar of balm to Emily's room. Emily lay silently, her face shadowed and scarred. Zola knelt beside her, dipped 2 fingers into the balm, and gently touched her stepsister's cheek. I don't hate you, she said softly. Emily didn't speak, but tears slid from her eyes, one after the other. Months passed, and the winds of time swept gently through the village of Nuku. The rains came and went, the crops grew tall, and the name Zola began to carry weight far beyond the village borders. She had returned from the royal palace, not in grand robes or with gold rings, but with a small wooden box of herbs, a reed mat, and knowledge that ran deeper than any river. She chose not to live in her old compound, but instead built a modest hut by the riverside and named it The Hands That Heal. It was made of clay and love, its walls lined with dried herbs, soothing teas, and folded mats for those who came not just with fevered bodies, but broken spirits. She welcomed everyone: widows with aching backs, children with skinned knees, and even men too proud to show they were hurting. Emily, once proud and loud, now moved like a shadow beside her. Her face remained hidden beneath a soft scarf, her voice seldom heard. But each morning, she swept the front path of the hut, brewed tea for visitors, and silently passed Zola the tools she needed. The scarred corners of her lips curled slightly more each day. Mama Queasy, on the other hand, stayed behind high compound walls. Though no one forbade her from walking the village square, her guilt followed her like a drumbeat. The people no longer called her name at the market. She often watched Zola from a distance, but never approached. Zola, true to herself, never mocked, never reminded, never rejected. She simply smiled, the kind of smile that softened hardened hearts. When asked about her past, she would only say, "Pain is a teacher, not a jailer." One afternoon, as the sun leaned lazily toward the horizon, a royal messenger arrived on horseback bearing a scroll sealed with golden wax. It was an invitation, urgent and personal. The queen's only child was sick. The palace requested Zola by name. Whispers flew through the village once more, but this time with pride. Children chased her down the road, cheering, "Our healer! Our Zola!" And as she packed her satchel and tied her wrapper, Zola looked once more at her quiet clinic, at her quiet stepsister, and at the quiet sky overhead. She said nothing. She only walked forward toward a future that was once almost taken from her, but now fully hers to claim. Years passed, and the village of Nuku became known far beyond its borders, not for its rivers or its crops, but for a small clay hut beside the water. The hands that heal grew into a sanctuary. Mothers brought their feverish babies. Travelers rested their weary feet. Even chiefs sent their injured sons to the woman with the calm eyes and steady hands. Zola never built high walls or sat on carved thrones. She sat on mats beside the wounded and listened. Her hair grayed gently, but her heart never hardened. Under the old baobab tree, where justice had once been served, children gathered on cool evenings to hear stories from the elders. And on special nights, they told the tale of a girl named Zola, who once stirred porridge with hope, not knowing someone had stirred poison for her. She was fed betrayal, the storyteller would say, eyes sweeping over the young faces, but served forgiveness. She swallowed pain but spat out wisdom. The children would sit wide-eyed, hanging on every word. They would whisper among themselves about Emily, who once hid her face, but later trained young girls in how to make tea for grief, and of Mama Queasy, who spent her later years sweeping temple steps, never once speaking Zola's name again. The story traveled beyond the village, told in markets and festivals, passed on like a precious seed. And always, it ended with the same proverb, karma drinks from the same cup it fills. Visitors to Zola's expanded clinic would stop to read the wooden sign carved by village youth, hung above the door with pride, "Here, even poison can become a path to healing." And inside, they would find not just medicine, but mercy. Not just healing, but hope. Subscribe to Innocent Stories for more tales of wisdom and redemption.